Hello everybody, welcome back to another video lesson for 6th grade history. Today we are going to be moving on with the New Nation Unit and talking about the first 10 amendments that were made to the Constitution. If you remember, we just talked about the Constitution and how it was created and why it was created because the Articles of Confederation were too weak, but the reality of it is not every representative at the Constitutional Convention was 100% on board with the way the Constitution stood, all right? In fact, some states refused to even sign it if there weren't changes that were going to be made. They were afraid that the new powers given to the federal government would just be way too great, all right? Again, if you remember from the Articles of Confederation, they purposely made a weak national government so that they couldn't turn itself into a monarchy or a place where a king is ruling over everybody. There were some colonies that realized that more power needed to be given to the national government, but there are still some that thought that it was going to be too much, and they needed to return some of the basic rights back to the people that live in the country. And this is where we get, like I said, our first 10 amendments to the Constitution, which is known as the Bill of Rights, okay? So in order to get everybody on board, the Bill of Rights is going to be written, and it's going to be considered a written guarantee of individual freedoms, and that's what's going to be added to make everybody happy. So as I mentioned before, the Bill of Rights were the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. The definition of the word amend means to change for the better, okay? So if you amend something, you're changing it, but you're changing it for the better, all right? And like I said before, the Bill of Rights is a written guarantee of individual rights. Now, Bill of Rights wasn't something that just popped into somebody's head one day and they wrote it down and created it. No, it was actually based on two documents that had been previously written. The first document that it was based on was the Virginia Declaration of Rights, written by George Mason. This outlined the individual rights that people within the colony of Virginia back before the Revolution would have had, and it was adopted and worked very well. The second document that the Bill of Rights was based on was the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedoms, which was also written by Thomas Jefferson, okay? Virginia Statute for Religious Freedoms outlined the guidelines for what people could or couldn't follow based on religious beliefs. And it was pretty loose, as you know, we have a lot of religious freedom here in the United States. We can practice whatever religion we would like. And the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom is going to be one of the first documents that outlines those types of policies and protections for the individual person. The Bill of Rights, though, will include, like I said, 10 amendments, and I'm going to briefly go over all 10 of them with you. First off, we get Amendment Number 1. This is our Freedom of Expression Amendment, all right? It guarantees freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press or publishing news sources, freedom of petition, meaning that you can come to a government official and give them reasons as to why things needed to be changed. We as Americans have that right. And we also have the right of assembly, meaning that we are able to gather without restrictions on numbers, provided, of course, it is safe to do so. I'm talking to you, coronavirus. But we have that right of assembly and the right to gather in groups, okay? That might not seem to be like a big deal, especially the gathering in groups part, but there are a lot of countries with less freedoms than ours who restrict, when and where people can meet and for what reasons. So this is actually a pretty big deal that we have this as the First Amendment to the Constitution. Article 2 talks about the ownership of weapons, all right, the right to bear arms and militia. This was important because, of course, as you know, the Revolutionary Army was completely made up of militiamen, just normal everyday guys who used their weapons from home in order to fight the good fight. And so Article 2, the Second Amendment of the Constitution, is put in to ensure that American citizens will still have the right to bear arms. Article 3 talks about the quartering of soldiers. It says that the United States cannot force somebody to use their private property to house soldiers, all right? This is a direct cause of the Quartering Act that the British put on the colonies during the Revolution, which stated that any person had to let British soldiers stay in their house if they were requested of that. And so Article 3 or Amendment 3 of the Constitution on the Bill of Rights states that this is not allowed in America. Article 4 discusses warrants and searches, so making sure that the government cannot search your private property without a due cause, all right, or without a court order, which is what we consider a search warrant now. And so they cannot enter property that they do not own unless, of course, you invite them in or they have that warrant to come in if you don't invite them and search anyways. Article 5 talks about individual debt and double jeopardy, all right? A lot of that has to do with the court system and making sure that people can't be put into situations where they're incriminating themselves. So if you've ever watched like a cop show, you might have heard somebody say, "I plead the Fifth." What they are doing is invoking their Fifth Amendment right, and within that amendment, it talks about how a person cannot be made to testify against themselves in a court without representation present. In this case, it would be a lawyer or somebody who can interpret the law and make sure that what you're doing isn't accidentally going to incriminate you, whether or not you're innocent or guilty. Article 6 is the right to a speedy trial by jury, all right, by a jury of your peers, people that live around you, and the ability to call witnesses to the stand in order to defend whatever case you may be fighting. Article 8 is the right for a jury trial, all right? This states that every person incriminated of something bad or, criminal has the right to be tried and to be looked at and examined by a jury of people who live around them. And then the last article is going to discuss bail and fines and what limits can be set on those as well. If I had to say, ladies and gentlemen, all 10 of these are, of course, very important. But if you are going to know and memorize any of them, I would say make sure that you know at least 1 through 5 when we're talking about the about the Bill of Rights. We'll talk more about the other 5 as well, but those ones are definitely the most important for you to know right now in 6th grade. You'll also cover this again in high school, where you're going to go a little bit more in depth on that as well. I know this was a short video, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm sure some of you are happy about that due to the other ones being very long. So at this time, please take this time to go over your note sheet again, make sure that everything looks good, and then come back and join us in class.